Union last summer and has been researching Joe Gerbracht for the last couple months. I think we'll find this topic very entertaining. Please welcome Kathy Svec.
Before I get started, I wanted to ask if how many of you in the audience worked for the Ames Theater Company? Get some hands up in the air. Yeah, there's a few. There's a few former employees out there. What about people who actually knew Joe Gerbracht? And put your hands up. Ooh, well, you'll be my fact checker here. Make sure I'm telling the truth. So you have to let me know. Well, I do have one more thank you. Dennis mentioned that we have been mining this wonderful, two wonderful scrapbooks that were given to us. So I would especially like to thank Joe Gerbracht's daughter, Jan Gerbracht Sakruski, and her husband Richard for donating to the Ames Historical Society those two huge scrapbooks full of clippings and pictures that documented Joe's long years in the theater business. And they are the basis for telling this rather amazing story. The history of movie theaters in Ames started before Joe Gerbracht, but it was Joe that truly made history with movie houses in Ames. He launched his 50-year career in the movie business in 1912. When he retired in 1962, that's 50 years later, he had owned 6 theaters in Ames and was a witness to the most dramatic developments in the music and entertainment industry. Joe was born on a farm 4 miles south of Ames, September 27, 1895. He was the second of 4 kids. The Gerbracht farm was crossed, interestingly, by 2 railroads, so it must have been quite a hustle and bustle on the Gerbracht farm. Joe had 3 siblings, 2 sisters, Helen and Della, and a little brother, Wilford G., also known as Jerry. And here they're shown on the front porch of a friend's house. Joe's father, Fred, was a forward-looking person who encouraged his children to use their brains and take risks. Fred owned the second automobile in Story County, an International Harvester touring car that provided the Gerbracht kids with transportation to school in Ames. Joe was 12 years old when Mr. K.H. Kahn opened the Scenic Theater at 121 Main Street. It was September 1907, and the Gerbracht kids enjoyed many weekly films at the Scenic Theater. 4 years later, in 1911, ground was broken for the Princess Theater at 117 Main, just 2 doors east of the Scenic. It was built by attorney C.G. Lee as an investment. A year after that, in 1912, Joe was an Ames High School senior when his father suggested to him that he and his 2 sisters go into business. With Fred's $5,000 loan, Joe, Helen, and Della bought and refurbished the Scenic, the site of many pleasant afternoons, at 121 Main Street. Since the Scenic had opened in 1907, ownership had changed several times. It was difficult in those days to satisfy demands for agreeable film content, and there wasn't much known about the hazards of handling cellulose nitrate film. But none of this dampened the enthusiasm of the 3 young entrepreneurs. Of course, like all men who are thinking about starting a business, Joe took a survey of 1. He asked himself, can I have fun at it? And can I make money? And he answered both questions affirmatively, and without any further surveying or planning, he dived into the movie business. The Gerbrachts remodeled the Scenic inside and out, installed ventilation, and Fred, Joe's father, designed a state-of-the-art movie screen. The theater was renamed the Twin Star. The grand opening featured The Black Chancellor, one of the first 3-reel movies. Admission was 10 cents, 5 cents for kids. Joe was general manager, handling bookings and advertising. Helen ran the box office, and Della played the piano to accompany the silent films. Helen and Della also sold tickets, ushered, and made announcements. Wilford was just 13 when the theater opened, and he handled many odd jobs. The Twin Star also had a player piano that provided spirited music to accompany the silent films, with piano rolls changed by the projectionist. Joe said of Helen, the oldest sibling in the Gerbracht family, she really had a way with the public. I don't think she ever refused admittance to a child that didn't have money. She would put the money in herself, write the child's name in a book, and cross it off when the admission was repaid. Seldom did anyone fail to pay her back. In a magazine interview where Joe recalled his early days, it said, "Even in the first pictures Joe exhibited, he recalls that the audience displayed only momentary qualms at the sight of a locomotive thundering out at them from the screen." Joe stated, "My brother Wilfred and I, although still in high school, tried to attend to everything. We had one helper in addition to my two sisters, and we were the janitor, projection machine operator, advertising manager, cashier, ticket taker, what have you. We had two big blackboards out in front for advertising. We never knew what the picture would be until the film arrived in the mail. So its arrival would be followed by a mad scramble to write the announcement on the blackboards. We had only single reel movies, and many of them were really only a half a reel long, pretty short films in those days." In addition to movie house chores, Joe played football for the 1912 Little Cyclone team. He graduated from Ames High in the spring of 1913, earning a football letter A and an honor A for his academics. He continued to combine business and education, attending Iowa State from 1913 to 15, majoring in mechanical engineering. The Twin Star, with seating for 300, proved to be a paying venture, and when pictures such as Birth of a Nation attracted audiences that were too big for the Twin Star, he rented the old armory on 5th Street and trucked chairs from Des Moines. Joe, as Dennis has mentioned already, was a truly great promoter. During the early years, they held contests for fiddlers, Charleston dancers, and amateur performers. There were style shows and hair fashion shows, special events for college students and children, and humorous promotional stunts. In 1916, a special Christmas show was shown to 1,000 youngsters. But of course, the theaters were not without controversy. About this time, the Gerbrachts began showing movies on Sunday. This was when laws existed prohibiting many types of businesses from operating on Sunday. In January 1918, there was an active movement among women church members throughout Ames to sign a petition against Sunday movies. City Council permitted Sunday movies on a limited basis during World War I for the benefit of student military trainees at Iowa State. But an ordinance was passed in 1922 prohibiting the showing of movies on Sundays. But that ordinance was certainly not to be the end of this very hot issue. Joe served in the Marine Corps during World War I, from June 1918 to January 1919. And it was then that he first began to fly airplanes, a very important skill that served him his whole life long. While he was serving, his sisters managed the business in his absence. When he returned to Ames, he and Helen bought out Della's business interest and bought the rival Princess Theater on East Main Street. So now begins their theater conglomerate. They bought their second theater. In 1919, Joe added vaudeville to his theater's offering, advertising live bathing beauties with words like darling, startling, and saucy. Local residents were vocal in their concern about the content of certain movies and certain live acts. Bare female legs caused much concern. A well-attended protest meeting at the Congregational Church resulted in a resolution containing the words, quote, "an outrage to our sense of decency," unquote, and calling for the Twin Stars license to be revoked. City Council was asked for action, and on October 11, 1919, they appointed a board of censors made up of prominent citizens to view movies to be shown in Ames. Theater operators were required to permit that board to view any picture or vaudeville act upon request. If they decided that a proposed showing was against the public welfare, they reported to the mayor. Failure to obey the mayor's order was subject to fines of up to $100, a lot of money for the day. When the movie industry later announced that it would censor itself and provide movie ratings, local sensory bodies ceased to operate. Also in 1919, talk began about opening a theater in Campustown. A big meeting was held on the second floor of the Champlin Building at Lincoln Way and Welch Avenue to discuss this issue. Dean Edgar Stanton, representing Iowa State, was opposed, deeming a theater to be a distraction for students. College President Raymond Pearson wrote to Mayor E.H. Graves, according to announcements and rumors, one company is planning to open a theater in Campustown in the near future. A second company insists that if one comes to the fourth ward, a second will come. The college looks at the matter from an educational standpoint. We would deeply regret having moving pictures established in the fourth ward. The fourth ward, of course, is the section of Ames that encompasses the college. The Ames City Council voted to limit theaters to downtown, but on August 5th, 1919, the council reversed itself by passing Ordinance 315, permitting the location of a movie theater in Campustown. The report in the paper said 8 local investors are lined up who believe that a movie house in Fourth Ward would bring a handsome return. Plans are drawn and in the hands of contractors who have a September 1 completion date. The building will cost $30,000 with $10,000 in fixtures. It will be brick with a fancy entrance, orchestra pit, and balcony that will seat more people than any other show house in town. Many years later, Milo Manning of the Ames Savings Bank commented to Joe, quote, "I haven't forgotten how that college bunch fought you, Stanton and Knapp. They were sure dirty short-sighted. Sometimes it's a good thing to have the good Lord step in and do a little execution." Those two fellows, including Captain Greeley, sure made life miserable for me when I started the Ames Savings Bank in 1903. But, oh well, let's forgive, unquote. The theater that was built south of campus on Lincoln Way, called the American, was contracted by property owner A.L. Champlin, and the operator was Mr. Matlack, who had owned the Princess Theater downtown. On December 29, 1919, the extra opening attraction was Cecil B. DeMille's Male and Female, a story of ancient Babylon. In 1920, Joe and Helen Gerbracht formed the Ames Theater Company and took over the American Theater, renaming it the Ames Theater. Now it's really getting to be a conglomerate, 3 theaters. That year, the Gerbrachts began a business relationship with the Des Moines theater owner, A.H. Blank. It lasted several seasons until 1922, when Sunday movies were abolished in Ames. Blank did not want to do business with such restrictions, but he was certainly to figure again in Joe's business life. We do have a picture of the interior of the Ames Theater, and sitting right in the front row is Mr. Champlin himself. In 1922, the first petition for Sunday movies was presented, but Ames voters turned it down. By 1928, the issue had become very controversial. There were petitions, letters to the editors, editorials, numerous news stories, and finally an election. Although the outcome indicated approval by citizens in the first 3 wards, but not the 4th ward, the council did not approve it. Affidavits alleging irregularities in conducting the election were filed by 1,500 citizens, and the mayor stated that the council had acted in bad faith. Council then voted to allow Sunday movies in all wards except 4th Ward. Great compromise. Nothing on Solomon there. In 1933, a petition to allow Sunday movies in the 4th Ward was presented, and finally, in November of that year, 1933, the ordinance prohibiting Sunday movies was repealed. And actually what the students were just doing on Sunday was they were just going downtown. So it really was not preempting students from seeing movies on Sunday. However, never one to miss an opportunity. During the time that Sunday movies were prohibited in Campustown, Joe provided bus service from the New Ames Theater to the downtown theaters every Sunday from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Patrons could wait comfortably in the Ames Theater lobby before being delivered downtown. More than one way to skin cap. In 1926, Wilford and Joe were licensed to fly. And in the fall, they formed the Gerbracht Aeronautic Corporation and leased a 40-acre field from the Ames Canning Company east of the Skunk River and south of Lincoln Way, creating the first airport in Ames. Interestingly, the famous humorist Will Rogers had a hand in marking Ames from the air. In a nationally syndicated column, he once complained about the lack of signs that could be seen from the air marking small-town airports. He offered to pay for the paint for any town where a marker of the name of the town and an arrow pointing to the airport would be painted. We took him up on it, remarked Joe. He wrote to us that he was glad Ames was such a short word. But he did send a check. It was $7 or $8. The sign remained for many years on top of the Princess Theater downtown. I really wish we had an aerial shot of that sign. Wilford was Gerbracht Aeronautical Corporation's president, airport manager, pilot, and flight instructor for the first flying service established in Ames. He also continued as the art and display director for all three theaters, and he was the assistant manager at the Ames. Joe maintained a financial interest in the airport, but was more focused on his theaters. Early in 1927, Joe sold his interest to Wilford. In May, Wilford moved the airport from the east side of the city to an 80-acre location a mile south of Ames. But in the summer of 1929, Wilford sold his interest back to Joe and moved to Newton to work for washing machine magnate Henry Odd, piloting his flying office. Now, Joe had a very hard time juggling both the airport and the theater business. And in late September 1929, he accepted an offer from the American Legion to lease the field. The field then became known as the American Legion Airport. But now, back to the movie business. In 1926, Joe bought Helen's business share, and he became the sole owner of the Ames Theater Company. Helen continued to be involved until she moved to Los Angeles to pursue other business interests. The Ames Theater Company had purchased the Princess in 1919, and in April 1926, plans were made for an extensive remodeling costing $75,000. The theater was also renamed the Capitol during this remodeling. And we have a shot of the inside of the Capitol. There it is. Fancy chandeliers. That house, I wonder what they were watching. Theater technology had been steadily advancing since the introduction of Thomas Edison's kinetoscope in 1894 that showed 8 to 12-minute flickers on short subjects. After that, there were many refinements in silent films. In 1926, across the country, 100 million people each week were patronizing 20,000 theaters. Hollywood studios, in an effort to meet the demand for 800 feature pictures a year, were operating at maximum capacity. When a device for sound was introduced, there was a tendency just to kind of leave it alone. There were many naysayers doubting that sound was here to stay. Early on, only part of the picture would have audio effects. But one man saw the appeal of sound, Sam Warner, one of the Warner brothers. The Warners decided on the disc method where the sound was recorded on records that were manually synchronized with the film. They called it Vitaphone and premiered it on August 6, 1926 in New York City. The response, needless to say, was enthusiastic, and the Warners rushed to equip theaters with the new equipment. On October 6, 1927, Warner Brothers presented Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer, and the entire industry began a rush of sound. Years later, the Ames paper reported that in order to dispel rumors that the voice heard in the theater was not that of the film's star, Lon Chaney, there was, on file at the Capitol Theater box office, Chaney's signed affidavit to the effect that the voice is genuine and that he speaks as 5 different characters in his film, The Unholy Three. On Christmas Day, 1927, Joe married Jean Mitchell. He was 32, she was 25. Luckily, both had survived the first airplane accident in Ames the year before, when the plane that Joe was piloting stalled and required an abrupt landing. An article in the Tribune in 1931 mentions Mrs. Gerbracht's activity in the theaters. She supervised sound coordination during previews and performances. They lived at 821 Douglas, and their only child, a daughter, Jan, was born in 1932. In a 1927 newspaper article, Joe announced a change in the Ames Theater Company organization, stating, "I'm sorry to have Helen leave the corporation that she helped to build. She has been a splendid business partner, but for some time, I have known of her interests in California that would eventually require her constant personal direction. Of late years, theater development has been along certain distinct lines, with a trend to bigger and better circuits. As soon as I knew that my sister was going to make her permanent home in California, I started working toward an affiliation that will make Ames one of the leading theater cities in the state of Iowa. And late Thursday afternoon, the final signature was placed on the last lease and the contract necessary to complete this arrangement. There are certain minor matters to be adjusted early next week, but on Wednesday, through the columns of the Tribune, I will reveal the complete details of what I believe to be the most important theater announcement ever made in this city." True to a guy in the movies, this cliffhanger hints of the next episode, like one of the serialized films that he showed in his theater. That year, A.H. Blank and Harry Weinberg of the Tri-State Theaters in Des Moines became Gerbracht's business partners when the two bought half of the Ames Theater Company, an arrangement that lasted for the rest of Joe's career. This happy affiliation improved the ease of getting pictures, often ahead of Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, and provided a vast network of theater owners who provided each other with inspiration and assistance. Joe said, "Mr. Blank was the greatest help to me that anyone could be. He gave me advice, loaned me money, and helped me solve my problems." Blank was certainly a force in central Iowa, and eventually owned 160 theaters in Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, and Illinois. He was a Romanian immigrant who had been influenced by a short-term job at the Trans-Mississippi Exposition. He started in business with Nickelodeon's, building the first dime house west of the Mississippi. He went on to form the Central States Theater Company and became a well-known community philanthropist in Des Moines. In 1943, he and his wife Anna built the Blank Children's Hospital in honor of their son Raymond, who died at a young age. Blank also supported the Des Moines Art Center, where 2 galleries are named in his honor, and he gave a gift to establish the Blank Park Zoo. In 1928, the Ames Theater underwent a major rebuilding to modernize and increase its capacity, reopening as the new Ames Theater. Seating accommodated 600 on the main floor and 450 in the balcony, with a stage for performances. By late 1928, Movietone and Vitaphone talking pictures were being presented at the new Ames Theater. Joe became involved in charitable causes, using his theaters for the public good. During the Depression in 1930, a theater party was sponsored by the Ames Theater Company and the Ames Tribune-Times for drought victims of southern states, the Dust Bowl. 1,100 people attended 2 performances held at the Capitol with food supplies as the only admission. The party exceeded estimates in the amount of food raised. The crowd brought canned goods, eggs, breakfast food, cereals, flour, and more. The sidewalk was filled and 5 persons were busy carrying food away from the door. Most patrons brought more than suggested, and some left packages without seeing the film. Gilchrist Coal and Feed ground a quantity of corn and oats so that it could be shipped. Dragoon Transfer trucked the food to Des Moines, where the railroad sent it to drought-stricken areas, both donating their transport. Joe was certainly influenced by the whimsical nature of the entertainment business. He changed his name 3 times. He was christened Joseph Benjamin Gerbracht. Later, he chose to use J. Benjamin Gerbracht. And this was modified later to just plain old Joe Gerbracht. But in the early 1930s, on a Hollywood trip, he consulted a numerologist. She told him that the best name was Joe B. Gerbracht, advising him to drop the T and add the B. She promised that he would make more money with less work, so he went to Nevada and officially changed his name. I'm not sure whether it had anything to do with the T and the B, but he certainly did make more money. But I don't think with less work. Recognizing the economy in 1931, a newspaper ad stated this country's leading educators assert that entertainment is as necessary to youngsters as shelter, clothing, and food. Good, clean entertainment is needed to sustain the morale of the young people of our country during these days of depression. Movies are mental tonic. Good movies are educational as well as entertaining, so send your kiddies to the movies often. 10 cents all times for kids at the Capitol. In 1934, Joe put $15,000 into the Capitol, enlarging the lobby and increasing seating capacity from 525 to 640 with new seats. A new stage was installed with an orchestra pit, and new interior finishes featured the newest shades of gold, silver, light blue, red, and white. Can you envision? New ventilation and lighting were installed, and the projection booth was set forward and doubled in size. Modern lounges, restrooms, and dressing rooms were installed in the basement. In 1936, Joe's theater interests were challenged by a Mr. Davis, who had other business interests in Campustown. Davis announced his plans to build another theater. Now, we don't know how serious he really was, but in 1938, Joe announced his own intentions to build another theater in Campustown. After the varsity opened, Davis was given the Man of the Year award at the annual Gridiron Dinner, which was a humorous occasion that annually roasted local business leaders. Davis was given the award and cited for his, quote, causing Joe Gerbracht to build a second theater in Campustown. After the 1936 homecoming football victory against Kansas, Iowa State won 21-7, a crowd of more than 400 exuberant students decided the theater owed them a free show. Now, prior to that year, Joe had unfortunately set a precedent of letting students in for a free show after a football victory. But that year, Joe objected to the free show assumption and called a policeman, who took a look at the rapidly growing crowd and called 3 more officers and Chief of Police William Cure. Rotten eggs and apples were thrown at the theater and broke neon signs and created just a big mess. Tear gas launched against the crowd mostly just blew away and harmed the police as much as anyone. And it took about 2 hours to disperse the crowd. Many agreed that it had been the worst riot in Denver. And I love the quote over on the right-hand side. It said, geez, if it had been a Big Six championship, you could have understood. But honestly, just a little old football. In 1936, Joe and Mr. Blank announced a new $125,000 building that would seat around 1,000 people. It was to be located on the north side of Main Street on 8 lots between Clark and Burnett, and would include the entire block to 5th Street. It would be ready the next year in 1937. This new structure was a part of a 3-year, $150,000 plan that also included a new front canopy and neon for the new Ames, as well as new seats, decorating, and draperies. For the new Main Street Theater, the Des Moines architectural firm of Wetherell and Harrison was selected. They had designed theaters in Burlington, Charles City, Estherville, and Osceola, and also designed in Des Moines the post office, the Scottish Rite Temple, North High School, and the addition to the Eastern Star Home in Boone. Very good credentials. The new theater was to embody the best features of new movie houses across the country. Roland Harrison of the firm made many extensive study trips. When the design was complete, it was described this way, quote, "The design is modernistic but not extreme. Color on the facade breaks up monotony, and it is in tune with the current trends of daring use of color. There will be glass brick verticals on the front. The marquee will be a construction feat, and the exterior walls will be doubled to provide an airspace for ventilation. Plenty of ground will be left for landscaping, and all construction will be fireproof. A balcony will connect to the ground floor with heavily carpeted ramps for beauty, safety, and quiet. There will be large lounge rooms and a children's playroom. Upholstered seats will be the latest design for comfort and spacing. The 4-story stage will be equipped for productions with dressing rooms. The front of the building will be lit with colored floodlights located across the street. The interior will be illuminated by indirect lighting with intricate color effects. Special earphones will be available for the hard of hearing. And an automatic ventilating and refrigeration system will maintain a constant temperature of 72 degrees, with a new 128-foot well drilled to supply water to cool the building. The theater will create 15 new jobs and will house Ames Theater Company local offices. Joe pledged to use local labor if possible. The paper said Ames is going to be right proud of her theater setup, and well, she should be. Now, as you would expect from an imaginative promoter, Joe ran a contest to name the new theater. A $25 prize was offered, and entrants could submit up to 5 names. The idea had to have a direct connection with the college to recognize the predominant influence of the college on the city. It had to be musical in sound, easy to pronounce, adaptable for publicity purposes, and impossible to divide or nickname. The name needed to be modern, unusual, and smart. Among the 460 ideas submitted were the quad, the Iowan, the gridiron, the beard shear, the student, the new cyclone, the educator, and 2 made-up words, the Iocolia, short for Iowa College of Agriculture, and Iostaco, short for Iowa State College. There's a few more listed there. They were really interesting. So the selection committee included the school superintendent and the head of the college music department. 14-year-old Norma Jean Ross won with her submission of The Collegian. Runners-up were the Varsity, State, the Uptown, and Campus City. I've just got some pictures here to show you how the Collegian grew. This is the site. Several structures were removed to make room. And here it is in progress, and you can begin to see some of those features on the upper levels, the upper parts of the wall. Here's that well going in that will supply the air conditioning system. And this is getting pretty close to the opening. Lots of finishing touches beginning to go onto the theater. At about this time, Joe was preparing for the grand opening, and invitations were sent out, and the newspaper published the plans for the grand opening in September 1937. When it opened, the Collegian was the largest theater in central Iowa outside of Des Moines, and it seated 1,000 people. The leading films of the day, such as Gone with the Wind, filled it to capacity. The grand opening featured the Midwest premiere of Double or Nothing, starring Bing Crosby and Martha Ray. The naming contest winner was presented with her $25 check, and local dignitaries addressed the audience. College president Charles Friley told of his early experiences going to one-reel movies and stated that the Collegian was a distinct advantage to the community and to the college students who attended. He said the theater gives a fine opportunity for visual education. A little bit different reaction than his predecessor at the college. At the dedication, when Joe was called to the stage, he said he was surprised that they should give him such a fine hand, for he knew in dealing with all classes of people that he sometimes stepped on toes and put on features that others might not choose. Concluding his comments, he told the story of the young couple who had a beautiful baby, and as the father gazed upon the child for the first time, he told his wife, "Now, all we have to do is pay for it." Inside at the theater in the auditorium, the seats were blue velvet, the side walls were brown and cream tones with designs in those tones and blue. The ceiling was green-blue to give a sense of vastness and height. Either side of the stage was flanked with buttresses covered with copper and silver leaf. I mentioned earlier the chandeliers that had multicolored lighting effects, and this is a close-up of one of those beautiful chandeliers, and I'm sure some of you who watch movies at the Collegian remember those beautiful chandeliers. Here is the lobby. It must have been on dedication day that these pictures were taken with all the bouquets of flowers around. And there is an usher in his striking uniform, ready to serve. This is the lounge on the upper level. Now, right in the middle is one of those S-shaped couches where you could sit one on either side and converse. More shots of the lounge with more interesting chairs. Look at those chairs, one high arm and one low sloping arm. Very modern. Now these display units were located in the lobby, and they advertised the current film as well as coming attractions. And you can see that they are very Art Deco in their design and beautifully lighted all the way around. Those are two of them, and here are several more. The one on the left actually advertises the films at the other theaters. Joe, the promoter, didn't miss an opportunity. And this is the lobby with all of those display units that we showed you individually. And the interesting design on the floor, and then around the ceiling, this elaborate painted design. Again, very Art Deco. And a kind of shiny ceiling. And you can't see the light fixtures all that closely, but they look like little Sputniks. They were very, very modern. And these were the stairs that went upstairs to the lounge, the curving stairs. 3 days before the grand opening of the Collegian, the Twin Star showed its last picture on September 19, 1937, after 26 years of presenting movies. Ben Cole Contractors and Nelson Electric were hired to convert the space for retail uses. Several years prior, a party had been thrown for all those born in Ames since the theater had started, and attendees packed 2 shows. The Twin Stars served its day and generation well. That former movie house space on Main Street most recently housed Pile Photo. It's hard to believe that was a theater. Joe announced that with the opening of the Collegian, the Capitol would discontinue matinees, but would be open evenings daily and afternoons and evenings on Saturday and Sundays and holidays. It would operate for 15 more years. Also in 1938, in another effort to keep Ames theaters up to the minute, $6,000 in improvements were made to the new Ames Theater, including an entirely new canopy with neon and chrome trim and up-to-date changeable lettering, 40,000 watts of electricity to illuminate the front of the theater, interior redecoration, a new ventilation system, and changes to the projection equipment, and a new giant panoramic curved screen measuring 18 by 36, improving on the old one that measured only 12 by 17 feet. 1938 was a very busy year for Joe and the Ames Theater Company. He followed through with plans announced 2 years earlier to build a second theater in Campustown called the Varsity. The $45,000 structure was placed on land leased from A.L. Champlin and was located east of the new Ames. It seated 600 and was also designed by Wetherell and Harrison, the design team for the Collegian. The front of the theater was constructed of glazed blocks. The canopy was in 5 colors, including the word varsity in powder green neon, a new variety just on the market. proscenium was designed in the new trend with dashes of emerald, cardinal, and beige. The walls were beige and cocoa, and the ceiling was a modernistic tone of blue. The theater was air-conditioned and featured lounges and restrooms and a Western Electric sound system. Champlin commented, "This constitutes another step toward the completion of my plan to establish a continuous row of permanent business buildings in the block between Welch and Stanton Avenues. The affiliation with the Ames Theater Company assures the people of Ames the best shows at an early date." The Varsity opened in September 1938. And you can certainly see the touch of the architects, although certainly not as fancy as the Collegiate. It has some of those same 40s deco touches. And here's the interior of the Varsity, a little smaller than the other theaters, but another packed house. Despite the many controversies over movies in the fourth ward, Joe always felt that he had good cooperation from college personnel. For example, in 1926, he won a contract with Iowa State College's Entertainment Committee to show films for students at the Princess and Twin Star that had previously been screened in Agriculture Hall. President Friley's comments at the 1937 Collegian dedication certainly confirmed goodwill. And in 1950, an article stated that, quote, "In a way, Gerbracht has become as much a part of Iowa State College in the students' minds as the Campanile and the swans on the lake," unquote. Former Ames Mayor Joseph Lawler wrote these recollections of Joe and his Ames theaters. "Joe Gerbracht gave me my first job in 1941 when I turned 16 and got my Social Security number. I worked first as an usher at the plush, fabulous Collegian Theater in a blue and yellow formal uniform. Later I became their projectionist. I recall that Gone with the Wind came on 13 reels compared to the usual 3 or 4 per movie. Later I was assigned to the new Ames projection booth. There I especially remember showing Captain January with Shirley Temple. I used to study my high school assignments between reel changes. My last position was as projectionist at the neighboring Varsity Theater. Before my father, Joseph Hugh Lawler Sr., left to serve in the Marine Corps in World War II, our family had Joe over for dinner. As the U.S. moved toward war in 1940, the paper quoted Joe as saying, "Never before has the opening of a new movie season meant more to the country than this fall. With such a large percentage of the world at war, entertainment and recreation will help keep the people of the United States calm and collected." In a 1944 article marking the 50th anniversary of the motion picture industry, Joe was interviewed. The article reported that after 32 years in the business, Joe Gerbracht still possessed the same unbounded enthusiasm with which he started into the moving picture game, as befits a fellow who asks his father for $5,000 to go to the movies. Joe lists all actors and actresses as his favorites. He works 14 hours a day at his business, and he knows what killed vaudeville, and he doesn't see any danger to motion pictures from television. Joe was quoted as saying, "Vaudeville was killed by the talkies and radio, but I don't think television will kill motion pictures because of the natural desire of people to gather in crowds. Some of our best crowds have attended after blizzards, which kept people cooped up and home for a few days." Gerbracht, always active in civic affairs, constantly used his position to engage war bond sales and salvage and relief efforts. In 1944, the first of several Joe V. Gerbracht Dramatic Awards of $100 was given to an Iowa State College student to recognize high standards in dramatic performance. Joe had responded to a suggestion by President Friley to establish this award for students involved in theater at Iowa State. Joe thought there just might be a future star in the making, and he was glad to provide the recognition. Joe and Jean divorced in 1938, and on November 25, 1949, he married Mildred Barr, the sister of his close friend and fellow sportsman, Charlie Barr. Joe was 54, Mildred was 10 years younger. She was a chemistry professor at Iowa State. Joe Mildred lived at 1900 Grand on an estate built in 1948 on Lot 1, Gerbracht's addition. The lot was over 65,000 square feet and extended to 20th Street. The house still stands, but it has a new address, 619 18th Street. And here's the newspaper story talking about the super colossal home of Joe Gerbracht that was being built. The home was 2 stories with 3 bedrooms and 3 full baths. The house featured a Chinese-style blind grill at the entrance with tile front steps. The door opened to curved stairs leading to the 2nd floor with a brass fine railing motif. With a brass fine motif railing. The living room had picture windows north and south and a screened porch on the west. The house featured the latest in appliances, an access door for milk delivery, air conditioning, and an intercom system. The dining room had a hidden wall safe for nightly deposits. The basement had 1 wall with extra thick wood for target practice. The house had an attached garage and greenhouse and a curved gravel drive in the shape of a G. Can you see it? 1 tree on the property was trimmed to form the Greek letter psi, and it still stands today. Eventually, the land surrounding the house to the north and east was sold off for lots to a home builder, Bob Buck, a handshake deal where Buck paid Joe as each house was sold. And here's the house today, the upper left. And down on the right, there's Joe, I think trying to get some snow off the gutter or something. In the late 1940s, seeing movies from your automobile had widespread traction and was at its peak about this time. The construction of the Ranch Drive-In was announced in early 1949. It was built 2.5 miles west of Ames on Highway 30 and opened July 7, 1949. Here's the truck with the materials for the big screen. And on the lower right is his manager, Ray Truesdell. And that's Joe on the tractor. And inexplicably, there are 3 Pi-Fis in attendance. My mistake. Now on the lower right, Joe and the ribbon-cutting dignitaries are all dressed up in cowboy attire, fitting for the Ranch Drive-In. The ranch's screen was 52 feet wide and the drive-in accommodated 750 cars on scientifically constructed ramps that ensured unobstructed view of the screen. Fencing and structures were in the ranch style and attendants were also outfitted for the rodeo. Joe said, "We have 14 acres of ground, all well drained. We brought in over 20,000 cubic yards of clay. This was covered with brown crushed rock, surfaced with white. The new theater attracted people from a 30-mile radius." After 2 years of operation, Joe discovered that drive-in patrons were different from patrons of his other theaters and that he could do a better job of featuring just what his customers wanted. Special events included fireworks, contests, and ladies' nights. Family nights were Tuesdays, a carload for $1, and midnight shows were added on Saturdays. In a newspaper story, Joe said, "Last January when I drove to Florida, I went down one route and back another and stopped at every drive-in I ran across. He took pictures and he talked to men in charge." The same idea was carried out on a trip to the West Coast. Many of the best ideas thus accumulated were revamped and worked into our Ranch Drive-In. One thing we had complaints about was the time it took to exit cars between shows. When we started, it took around 22 minutes at the main evening break on weekends. However, in laying out our original plan, we left a large amount of space between the highway and the rustic fence. We now line up cars in this space and use 2 exits. This spring, the ranch will acquire complete playground equipment, merry-go-rounds and slides and the whole works. Joe was especially proud of his flower gardens at the ranch, saying, "I'm sorry we didn't have some color pictures made of them. We laid telephone poles on the ground and fastened them together at each end and then filled the space with good black dirt. This year they will be more extensive as we had hundreds of canna lilies, tulips, geraniums, and mums planted last fall that will bloom through the spring and summer. In 1951, for the 50th anniversary of the movie industry, a series of top-notch films were scheduled to help prove that Hollywood was making better and better movies. Some of the films were A Place in the Sun, Streetcar Named Desire, Quo Vadis, Kon-Tiki, and The Greatest Show on Earth. Post-war movie attendance was on the rise, and TV had not affected interest in top-notch movies. Joe stated that Ames received approximately 400 new shows a year, or from about 70 to 80% of all the Hollywood pictures that they put out each year. Each week there were about 12 shows that could be seen in Ames. For the 50th anniversary, 200 Hollywood stars, producers, directors, and writers toured the U.S. as ambassadors. 5 Hollywood people came to Iowa for a meeting of movie people in Des Moines, and then toured other towns. Those that came to Ames were hosted at a star dinner sponsored by Joe at the Memorial Union, attended by business and professional people. In attendance was Iowa State College President Charles Friley, who stated that the movie industry has learned a lot in the past 50 years and has a great future. Ames Mayor Allen gave a tribute to Joe that ended in a standing ovation. The guests were producer Richard Maybaum and stars MacDonald Carey and the Golden Circle starlets Irene Martin, Judith Ames, Peter Baldwin, and Barbara Rush, originally of Cedar Rapids. Carey spoke, saying that, quote, "The movie industry is a solid and sober industry built on a sound and good system of ethics." Maybaum, a University of Iowa attendee, said, "Our town is like your town. The only remarkable thing about Hollywood is the talent. Hollywood is not fabulous Baghdad most people think it is because of the carryings on of a few misguided people that hit the headlines." He said the purpose of the tour was to discover what we can do for you, how we can serve you, and how we can bring you laughter, beauty, and inspiration. Well, you know, of course, the other purpose of the tour was to keep people coming to the movies. In early April 1952, the Capitol closed. Joe's other theaters were better able to accommodate the changes in movie technology. The Capitol had been a place where action movies were shown, lots of westerns and shoot-'em-ups of all kinds. Among the young audiences that frequented the Capitol, it was known as the Bloody Bucket. If you look over on the left, just under the marquee, there's a for sale sign. At the Collegian in April 1952, a milestone occurred as historic as the advent of color and sound. Wanna Devil was shown, the world's first natural vision 3D feature-length film. Thousands of dollars were invested in new equipment for the Collegian. New screens, special lenses, motorized equipment to handle 2 projectors at the same time, and special cardboard glasses with Polaroid lenses. A news story said, "People of Story County have experienced many firsts down through the years. The novelty of a goggled audience will be nothing compared to the novelty of a lion leaping straight at the audience from the screen." Each Hollywood studio developed some version of the new technology. 3D productions used 2 cameras to photograph a subject from slightly different angles. The resulting film had to be projected on a screen from 2 cameras, and the 3D effect is brought out with the Polaroid glasses worn by viewers. Now, slightly different was the widely publicized Cinerama, which required 3 cameras, both for filming and for projecting. The images from the 3 projectors were thrown on an extra-wide curving screen. Since humans are used to seeing objects at wide angles themselves, the wider screen and speakers placed around the theater produced the effect of reality. Still, another type of picture had been developed. Instead of attempting a 3D effect, it widened the picture on a larger, flat screen. Through the use of a specially adapted lens, the camera squeezed the picture on film. Another special device on the projector widened the image again to produce a view nearly 3 times as large as that from a conventional projector. Theaters had to provide the new wider screens. Paramount came out with Paravision, Warner had Natural Vision 3D, 20th Century Fox had CinemaScope, MGM and Columbia both had their own versions of 3D. And there's Joe showing off that intricate lens that expanded the image to fit the widescreen. In April 1954, the first CinemaScope film was shown in Ames. It was The Robe, a biblical story starring a young Richard Burton and a cast of 5,000. Publicity said, crowd scenes and spaciousness of architecture benefited from the bigness that CinemaScope lends each scene. It's almost possible to count the threads of the homespun garments, so great are the projections. CinemaScope lacked the dimensional qualities of Cinerama, but images were more crisp and clear. The Robe cost $5 million to make in 1953. With CinemaScope and stereophonic sound, the film carried 4 soundtracks and 1 control track. New and additional sound equipment was installed. 12 new speakers at the Collegian created the impression of being there. For more realistic sound effects, different horns were used during the showing of the film, as called for by the control track. CinemaScope was described as the greatest improvement since the development of sound films. The big 17 by 39-foot screen was fully used for the first time. Now, The Robe was the first CinemaScope film, and the second was How to Marry a Millionaire, starring Marilyn Monroe, Betty Grable, and Lauren Bacall. Now, boy, that's a lot of female attraction on a big screen. In 1954, the new Ames celebrated its 35th year with a new exterior, a modern look with the ginger-colored brick accented by glass doors at a receding angle. 2 small stores on either side of the entry were eliminated, giving an additional 25 feet of frontage and room for display cases. The box office moved from the center to the left front, and the lobby was remodeled, featuring mahogany panels, coral-colored walls, and new lighting and a redesigned concession center. The main room, lounges, and restrooms were redecorated, and the theater was also fitted for CinemaScope. The varsity was also redecorated with marquee improvements. Joe's daughter, Jan, graduated from Ames High in 1950 and attended Drake. In 1955, she married Richard Cypersky of Chicago. In 1957, Richard joined the Ames Theater Company as a theater manager doing advertising and public relations. Improvements at the theaters were constant. In 1957, the decor at the new Ames was updated to the Swedish modern style, and in 1960, the screen was widened at the ranch to 100 feet. Joe's theaters were noteworthy for their acoustics and the quality of sound, equipment that was always being upgraded to provide the best possible movie experience. Now, I'd like to take a break and talk about the many special events and projects that Joe undertook that involved doing community good, and at the same time, of course, involved people coming to the theaters. In 1934, Joe hosted children at a toy show at the Twin Star. The price of admission was an old or new toy to be brought to the theater for the Ames Legion's, or the American Legion's, campaign for gifts for needy children. During World War II, in 1942, the Story County quota for war bonds needed to reach a goal of $2,215,000. A Salute to Heroes month was sponsored by the motion picture industry, and it added impetus to the drive that sought to set a new all-time record. Theaters assisted through on-screen publicity, as well as pushing their own bond drives to sell stamps and bonds at the theater. Joe was the Zone 6 drive director. Movie stars Gene Tierney and Chester Morris came through Ames and participated in a parade and were later available to autograph war bonds that had been purchased. Joe brought the stars to Ames from Des Moines. Former Mayor Joe Lawler recalled that parade with Gene Gene Tierney. He said, "I played the trombone in the high school band and recall when the beautiful actress Gene Tierney came to Ames to join Joe at a parade down Main Street. We marched ahead of Joe's red convertible with Joe and Miss Tierney seated aloft. And as we were marching, we looked back as often as we were able to increase the rapture of it all." Teenage memories. Tierney was called Hollywood's Mona Lisa. She was a pretty girl. During the Fourth War Loan Campaign in 1944, the motion picture industry set a goal of a bond for every seat in every theater, 11.5 million seats. The opening of that drive corresponded with a caravan of war heroes and movie personalities to 200 cities to spur bond sales. In Ames, there was a free movie day for anyone who bought a bond. One of Joe's theaters was the designated drop-off place during the scrap metal drive. Also in 1944, the National Clothes for Russia drive occurred to assist 80 million destitute Russians returning to their devastated homes after the German retreat. In Ames, Joe was chairman of the drive that netted 25,000 pounds of clothing, more clothes on a population basis than any other city in Iowa. Joe gave free shows at all his theaters in conjunction with the drive. A letter of congratulations from a local resident said, "The editor says this shows what Ames can do, but I know that this shows what Joe Gerbracht can do." After the war in 1947, Americans formed the Friendship Train, a civilian effort to collect and send food and goods to war-torn countries in Europe. When the train came through Ames to collect donations, Joe headed the reception committee. In 1953, Joe cooperated with the Ames Ministerial Association and offered the ranch drive-in for 7 a.m. sunrise church services held in June, July, and August. This generated much goodwill and was a model to other drive-in owners. Sunrise services continued for several years and were quite popular. In 1957, 1,200 people attended an Easter sunrise service at the ranch. Joe won an award for this cooperative venture. In the 1950s, there were the annual summer playground program parades that went from the bandshell to the Collegian, where kids were treated to a movie. The event included a costume contest, and summer recreation program participants included children enrolled in crafts, baseball, storytelling, day camp, drama, square dance, tennis, playgrounds, and swimming. Also in the 1950s, thousands of youngsters crowded into Ames theaters for a special program opening the holiday season as guests of local merchants and the Chamber of Commerce. It was a Saturday event and Santa was on hand to hear child wishes. Mothers were told to leave their children at the theaters while shopping. How convenient. In 1959, 300 kids in grades 1 through 8 from St. Cecilia's School walked to the Collegian to view the new movie, The 10 Commandments, a 3-hour and 40-minute film. I can personally attest because I was there. Those 3 hours went very fast. In 1961, Ames's Dancing Earl Twins appeared in the movie Can-Can with Frank Sinatra. Mrs. Earl said, when the girls were in high school, Joe used to let them go in and watch the dancing in any movie that came. They didn't stay for the whole show, just the dancing, and as often as they wished. In Joe's scrapbook was a thank you note from a friend, W.H. Root. I certainly want to thank you for your letter to Warner Brothers. You must be a big shot in the movie industry because your letter certainly opened the doors of the studio. My wife and I enjoyed a very fine trip through the studio and will be glad to see the pictures we saw in the making. Virginia Mayo and Ronald Reagan in Working Your Way Through College, and Gordon McRae in About Face. Joe was very generous with Iowa State students. In an interview in 1950, Joe said, "You can get a lot of enjoyment out of helping someone and showing interest in what they do. I get a tremendous kick out of helping the college students." He loaned equipment to students and professors. Draperies, spotlights, and so forth. He allowed special displays for homecoming and other events to be placed in front of the theaters, and would sometimes let students sell theater tickets and keep a percentage of the sales. He flashed campus event announcements on the screen for free, and he let student performing groups practice before a live audience in his theaters during shows. And his famous red convertible was always used for Visha and homecoming parades as the Queen car. Can't see it, but that car is red. He gave many complimentary tickets and prizes for various campus activities and furnished printed athletic programs for basketball and football. He also secured and screened instructional films for college departments. Now the poster that is on the right is for movies during Visha, not for Visha. So if you read across the bottom at the new Ames in the Capitol, come and see a movie. He said, in a way, our setup with the college student is a sort of selfish one. We feel that we can get ideas from them, too. 1,500 students belonged to the ward system, that is, they lived off campus, and he helped pick out entertainment for them shown several times a week. If good student behavior was demonstrated during the football season, it was rewarded at the end of a season with a free show lasting all afternoon and evening. During World War II, he provided 2 free shows a week for Navy trainees who were in residence on campus. A letter found in the Society's collection was written by Walt Early, a naval training student during 1944. He wrote home to his parents in Providence, Rhode Island. Dear Mom and Dad, I just came from a free movie over in Dogtown, which was really pretty good. We are all allowed to go to a free movie in town every Monday night as guests of the theater manager. Not too bad. An Ames Theater Company employed many college students, and they would be called together in regular personality pushing sessions, teaching them how to walk properly with poise and grace, to give them a feeling of importance and confidence. Joe looked to hire people with a sparkling, alive quality and taught them to use their voices properly to give added appeal. He believed that there was a way of saying thank you that actually sounded as if you didn't care. And he didn't want his employees talking that way. He felt that when people called to see what was playing, they should be told in an interested way. A letter from Mr. Blank to Joe in the early 40s said, I know now that you have become the leading citizen of Ames. In the years that have passed since I first knew you, you have become more mellow and have a better understanding of the problems of the other fellow as well as your own. That is why you are getting along so fine in your community. Joe is a member of the Elks, Kiwanis Club, Knights of Columbus, Isaac Walton League, Memorial Union, Variety Club, Iowa State Cycling Club, American Legion Post number 37, Ames Golf and Country Club, and was a charter member of the Boy Scouts of America. He attended St. Cecilia's Church. He was also enrolled in the National Aeronautical Association, the Motion Picture Theater Owners of America, Motion Picture Pioneers, the National Association of Theaters of America, and of course, he was a member of the Republican Party. Now, I have mentioned throughout this talk about what a great promoter Joe was. He never missed an opportunity. He was very inventive and creative in what he did to draw attention to his theaters. In the scrapbooks, we found several renditions of brainstorming lists, some typed and some handwritten, containing several dozen ideas. A 1944 interview marking Joe's 32nd anniversary as a showman, and in that article, he recalled some of his top stunts, as he called them. Some of them backfired, he admits, but those that did turned out to be swell attention getters, some of them even better than I'd planned. So I'd like to mention a few of those promotions. Actually, doing this show, I've learned a lot about promoting. An early stunt was having someone lead a goat in a college parade. The goat was to have a sign that said, "Don't let the blues get your goat. Attend the show." It was a good idea, but Joe had a terrible time finding a goat until Al Batten loaned him a goat with the understanding that it was to be returned in the same shape as when he got it. Now here are a few images. On the right is a storefront window display. Very elaborate. We did quite a bit of that. On the left is a sign that was actually posted at Carr's Pool. He must have worked out a deal with Emmett Carr, promoting the Cool Capitol Theater at a cool Carr's Pool. Boy, really promoting that air conditioning. Must have been hot in the summertime. Now on the right, must have been at the Capitol. The sign on the side of the thing says, "Park your guns here before you see When the Daltons Rode." And I'm hoping those were little kid cap guns, you know. This Army equipment was advertised in the movie Battleground. Again, a real big attention getter in front of the theater. And here's Joe tooling around town in a Model T with his daughter Jan, again promoting film. Now in 1930, on New Year's Eve, a wedding was held at the New Ames Theater. Joe arranged with 40 Ames merchants to donate a complete outfit for the newly wedded couple. The couple selected was one Joe thought to be the most eligible of several couples who asked to be considered. The couple had planned to be married after graduation, but couldn't pass up the chance at the hope chest full of gifts. The 11 p.m. ceremony was between New Year's Eve features. The wedding, as a show stunt, was very successful, Joe says, but he admitted that he didn't know whether the couple lived happily ever after. He added, but they should have. On another occasion, Joe conceived the idea of presenting a real-life baby as a gift from the stage to the holder of the lucky ticket. Now this one aroused the ire of good men and women in legal action. Joe was adamant. This baby is from a very fine family, and its mother can't take care of it much longer, he explained. I am going ahead with my plan. From the stage, he presented the baby, all dolled up in pink ribbon, and rolled onto the stage in a baby buggy. The audience gasped with laughter, and the baby turned out to be, of course, a baby pig. On one occasion, he wanted to stress the high quality of his movies. He hired a stuntman who put him on stilts and placed the man's head on the level with second-story windows. He held a sign that said, "High in quality," and listed the names of forthcoming movies. That was one of my best ideas, Joe said. Until an hour later, when an irate female voice brought him down to earth, demanding that he do the same to his stilt walker. "He's looking through my windows," the woman said. To advertise the movie The Black Box, Joe had a giant box kite built to carry a 3 by 30-foot banner. That was some kite, Joe said. It was capable of lifting about 75 pounds. And we put it up that morning, and it stayed up all day. But once school was out, a kid lured away one of our kite guards, and the next thing we knew, the cord was cut, and away went the kite. On another occasion, Joe hired a small person to act the part of Charlie Chaplin. Cane, mustache, shoes, walk, the whole works. The midget paraded Ames streets for one whole morning, but about noon made a technical error by walking by the central school. Joe was driving by about that time, and there stood the midget in his underwear with tears streaming down his face. The kids had stripped him of almost all of his clothes and his souvenirs. For Shepherd of the Hills, Joe rented 6 sheep and put them in a pen in front of the theater. In those days, I was the ticket taker, janitor, doing everything. The first thing I knew, there was a lot of noise in front of the show. I went out and found no sheep. The sheep were going up the street, each one in the arms of a very husky college student. We finally rounded them up, all but one, and it probably ended up in stew the next day. 2 stunts with airplanes got Joe noticed throughout the nation. The first happened when Joe wanted to attract attention to one of the first movies in which an airplane played an important part. I took our plane up and began doing rolls and stuff like that. I had a coat lying on the vacant seat, and the first thing I knew, out it fell. I watched where it landed approximately and came down to the Tribune office and put in an ad. It was one of the first ads in history for something that had been lost from a plane. But the coat was returned. Someone found it in a cornfield. Perhaps the most serious backfire of a stunt involved a flight by Joe and brother Wilford on the morning before a college football game. Joe's idea was to bomb the college and the city with handbills. On the ground, they tested a homemade bomb made around a bunch of circulars, set it off, and noted with satisfaction that the circulars were spread over a wide area. On the flight, about 2,000 feet up, Joe tossed another such bomb over the side. It promptly got caught in the slipstream, flew back to the tail, lodged there, and exploded as planned. It blew our ship into a spin and took off most of the tail covering, Joe said, and it scared us absolutely to death. We had just enough covering to get back to port, and we did succeed in attracting attention. If you look real carefully up toward the top of that, you can see that fair frame. The 1930 Popularity Queen contest was held the Saturday of homecoming. 9 local merchants donated prizes with a $189 Brunswick radio as the grand prize. Merchants gave out vote coupons that had to be dropped in theater lobbies. 27 young people were entrants. The winner was announced at the New Ames Theater to a packed house. After the movie, the radio was carried out onto the stage, and a little girl dressed as Queen from Radio Heaven with a white crepe paper costume and crown knighted the winner with her wand. You kind of picture that. In 1949, the Miss Iowa State Freshman Contest was held in conjunction with the premiere of a new Loretta Young movie, Mother is a Freshman. Contestants were judged on academics, activities, and artistic talents. At the premiere, the Queen and 2 runner-ups appeared on stage at the Collegian with a Hollywood-style pomp and ceremony. Prizes included $100 cash and a $100 wardrobe, and a chance to win a 1-week trip to Hollywood. In the late 1950s, there were hula hoop contests, a Tribune published picture coloring contest, an event featuring the first runner-up to Miss America, and a style show with the theme, You Can Buy It in Ames, held at the Collegian. At the Ranch Drive-In was an appearance by Russell Smith and his show horse, King. In 1960, a picture caption in the paper said, "Shoppers in Ames Friday must have imagined that they had been transported to a muddy track at Santa Anita or Hialeah when they saw the famous racehorse, Seabiscuit, coming down the Main Street stretch." The fact that the life story of the famous horse forms the background of the movie that opens at the Collegian on Sunday had plenty to do with this unusual scene. Joe had a good relationship with the Tribune, and a number of shared promotions involved free movie tickets with the purchase of a new subscription, but there were many other joint ventures. In 1931, Joe and the Tribune sponsored the Halloween Good Conduct Awards. Children between the ages of 8 and 14 who agreed to conduct themselves in a peaceful manner on Halloween night, and whose parents or guardians would certify that good behavior, would be given a free ticket to a Capitol Theater matinee of Zane Grey's Rider of the Purple Sage, plus a new episode of our game, as well as a cartoon. What incentive! A pledge coupon was published in the paper. 850 kids responded. Chief Police Cure thought that the campaign was very effective, as no actual property damage was reported that Halloween. The Tribune and Ames Theater Company also sponsored the Birthday Club for kids under age 14. They registered at the Tribune for a membership card, and then during the child's birthday month, brought in a birthday coupon and had been clipped from the paper and exchanged it for a theater pass to a once-a-month party at the Capitol. On one National Newspaper Boys Day, 175 newsboys for the Des Moines Register and Ames Tribune attended free movies on a Saturday and were treated to popcorn and sweets. In 1953, a contest for high school students was sponsored by the theater company, the Tribune and KASI Radio. Cash prizes were given to write on why I like going to the movies. The letters that were received were printed in the Tribune or read on KASI. The judges were Ellen Landon from the Tribune. Ellie is here tonight. Art Skinner from KASI, and Mary McNown, who was an Ames High School English teacher. In 1953, the Ames Theater Company and the Tribune co-sponsored the Chuckle Ad Contest that attracted an enthusiastic response. Instructions were to take the one ad section of the Tribune and use 3, 4, or 5 whole lines from various advertisements and put them together in a new way so that they had a new and humorous meaning. Free theater tickets were the prizes to 3 daily winners. And the text for several of the winning ads read, for example, Western-style saddle, ride to and from Des Moines, automatic heat on paved street. Sewing and altering of homegrown African violets for working men on the bus line. Large size, very good condition bookkeeper, 21 to 35, to work acres of land 8 miles north of Ames. So they published these every day for a week or so, and everyone had a good time. In 1955, Paramount News sent a film crew to cover Visha. Joe said, "Every year we've had a photographer come here from Des Moines to cover this college event. However, the pictures they took were only on our local screens. Every year I've put in a pitch trying to get them to follow up this event on film. And now we have finally gained our goal. If the pictures turn out, they will be shown on black and white news film all over the country." Joe felt like he understood the workings of the college student's mind. He knew that they considered themselves very adult, and his advertising in the Iowa State Daily was of the, quote, dreamy, romance, and cheesecake type, unquote. The text in a Iowa State Daily ad for a Christmas film was said to be a holiday of teasing and squeezing, and that's bound to be pleasing. Another ad said, "Students, give your brain a lift, a short vacation, an inspiring journey. Try a vacation trip at the cozy Collegiate downtown." Joe regularly sent free season passes to prominent citizens, including the school superintendent, church pastors, the mayor, college president, and many more. In 1949, all members of the fire and police departments and their wives and children were guests of the Ames Theater Company at a Christmas theater party. But the most successful promotion was bank night. Joe said it was almost a religion with some people to attend bank night. They'd go without meals, get up from sick beds, postpone out-of-town trips just to be able to come. Now, in all of night, it looks like some kind of a lottery thing. In all of the scrapbook, there was no explanation of bank night. So if anybody out there knows what bank night involved, let us know. But it does look like it involved a big giveaway of money. Now, Joe was also a very noted sportsman who enjoyed going fishing and hunting as often as he could get away. The outdoor section of the paper carried many stories about his trips west and south, ventures that often included his good friend and neighbor, Charlie Barr. The trophies from these trips were mounted and displayed in his office and in the lobby of the Collegiate. The picture from the scrapbook, the picture from the scrapbook was taken actually at the Memorial Union, but many residents remember the sailfish that hung in the theater. Ooh, we got those flipped. There's the sailfish, and then the other slide was Mildred and Joe actually catching that sailfish. Now, in 1962, Joe announced his retirement from the Ames Theater Company, and he and Mildred prepared to split time between their Golden Beach, Florida home and the one in Clear Lake that they had owned for many years. Letters and reminiscences rolled in to commemorate his many years in business and to thank him for his contributions to the community. Success in a business is not luck, Joe said. It's deciding what you want to do and staying with it. It's working hard and it's using your imagination. Joe often worked 14 to 15-hour days, 7 days a week, and made it a practice to attend conventions connected with the theater business to keep up with new ideas and practices. Joe was known as the old grandmother of the theater circuit for his insistence on neatness in his buildings and promptness from his employees. He said sometimes they complained, but later on seemed to feel that the discipline had been good training, and they would often write and tell me so. Local management of the theaters was handed over to longtime associate Ray Truesdell, who was assisted by Ernest Kamer and Betty Christensen. Now, Joe, of course, was a true movie fan. He claimed to have seen 95% of the pictures booked at his theaters. He made 2 or 3 trips a year to Hollywood, where he met and often visited with the great stars and producers. Gary Cooper and Will Rogers were 2 of his all-time favorites, and he's pictured here with Dale Evans and Roy Rogers. He would sometimes be as much an attraction as his films. He would dress in a tuxedo and his trademark bow tie and greet customers in the lobby. He knew everyone, and people enjoyed his antics. Sadly, this well-deserved retirement was to be short-lived. On Saturday, May 25th, 1964, Joe was found near his car on a road north of Clear Lake. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 69 years old and had been in ill health and was undergoing treatment in Rochester, Minnesota. We cannot know what caused Joe to make this decision, but the news from his doctors certainly must not have been good. Thus, a life immersed in drama ended dramatically. All the Ames theaters went dark for a day to honor his memory. This remembrance appeared in the Tribune. Quote, "He was a showman. He liked to drive big, fast cars, preferably red and with the top down. He was one of the first airplane pilots in the area. He was a sportsman. He was flashy." That's a Jaguar, in case you're didn't know. He was the nearest to a P.T. Barnum that ever called Ames his hometown. But more than that, he was a sincere, honest citizen who took to heart his responsibilities to his fellow men, his church, and his community. Show business was Joe's life work, and in spite of many adversities, problems, and competition, he made a success of it. He developed the properties of the Ames Theater Company into the finest theater facilities in the Midwest. At his retirement, he was one of the 3 oldest businesses in Ames under one management. Unquote. Joe is buried in the Ames Cemetery. Although none of the theaters that Joe owned is still operating today, the impact he had on the development of our community is immeasurable. In many ways, he is a model of a creative, hardworking businessman, an active and engaged citizen who used his resources for both private and public good.